Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week as we go through this scorching time in summer. It's August 1st, 2025. Hope everybody's staying cool, taking precautions not to get stuck out in the broiling weather, especially if you're in travels. Make sure you're carrying water, all the vital essential things, right? Have a backup plan. All right, folks. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about enabling and a little bit about codependence. I know, don't click off. We're going some places with this. you know, if you think about codependence, what do you think about? I mean, what comes to mind? More often than not, people think about abusive drugs and people who, enable others by providing them those things. And that's true. Absolutely. No doubt about it. It's a problem and it's a global problem, really, right? And blessings go out to everybody who's fighting that fight to get healthy, right? We want to support folks who are going through tough times, austere situations, and those who haven't really awakened yet to begin their journey back to health. In the meantime, let's take this in a little different direction. So, so when you think of codependence or enabling, right? Uh, you think of what? I mean, what comes to mind? Anything? Anything? Bueller? Bueller? What should come to mind is a crutch, right? When we're kids and we're riding our bicycle, our parents might put training wheels on that allows us to ride the bike and kind of learn how to begin to operate and get our balance a little bit more. But we have those training wheels. And those training wheels are an assist, right? You could say they're a crutch, right? We're not riding the bike yet, and we're relying on those training wheels. Then after we've ridden for a while and we get brave enough as we get a little older, we say, okay, I'm going to try it without the training wheels. I take those training wheels off and you run right into a tree or whatever. Stories are, you could go around the room and probably in any organizational family or really any group and talk about your wipeouts on bicycles. I could tell you about a few of my own, but anyway, so those training wheels, they serve as a crutch, right? And it's in a developing situation, we kind of use a crutch, right, to gain our confidence until we can do something on our own, and then we're off to the races, right? We're doing our own thing. We're riding that bike on our own. And it's also true, think of it this way. Isn't our education somewhat like this, right? We have somebody guide us through education, be it family, be it, the structured school systems and so on. Could be your churches, could be all kinds of avenues, right? If you're in the scouts at all, if you're doing any kind of extracurricular when you're up and coming kid, you might be part of a multitude of groups, right? And then what do? They help develop you, but they're kind of serving as a guiding force, right? A bit of a crutch. But when you're developing, we don't really look at things like that, right? We're young and we're developing. Even in organizations, when we become adults and we're out there, even people starting out on their first job, even if you're out of college, right? You have, while they're in college, you might have interns. And interns really kind of get mentored along, right? And those mentors, they serve as a bit of a role of crutch, right? But we don't look at it that way. Why? Because we're developing. But as we get further along, right, after we should be developed to a greater degree, we go into, we might be working in an organization, right? And when we do that, now, while we're maybe learning a little bit in the beginning, learning product and learning process and all those things, still kind of getting trained, or maybe trainers, people who guide the process, right, to get you familiar with things, familiarization training, right? Who hasn't heard that phrase? So, so you get a little bit of that. But then after that, okay, I'm good. I'm off to the races, doing my thing. And we don't really think of really, even though we might have annual trainings and different types of training, we don't really think about it much. But what can happen is that think of it systemically. When you're going into an organization, you don't really question this to this level. But I'm going to peel the onion back right now. So if you need to put your seatbelt on, if you need to have a seat, I'm about to call out some stuff, right? About to do it. So think of it this way. All organizations are relying on a codependent paradigm, right, to operate. Now you might be asking yourself, Steve, what are you talking about? We're not codependent. We don't have any abuse issues, blah, 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 whatever. You may not have those things, but you have, what you do have in all organizations, even those who proclaim not to, you have, and there's a reason why, and I'll tell you what the reason is, and it's not necessarily a dubious thing, although when we don't question things, what happens? The dubious can take advantage, right? So I'm going to defang the dubious. I'm going to empower you with some information here. And I'm going to tell you this. Once you're made aware of this, I'm about to give you about an 8 to 10%, roughly, depends on how dedicated and focused you are and how engaged you are and how strong your will is to do so. But I'm going to give you about an 8 to 10% improvement in your productivity and your quality. And this is why I'm going to say this. Most organizations, let's say about 95% of them, are codependent organizations. And the reason they are is because of compartmentalization. Now, you might be thinking, well, yes, Steve, but we have to kind of compartmentalize into departments because we have engineers over here, we have human resources over here, we've got production over here, we've got here, and this and that, and everything else, right? We have the lab over there, and we've got, admin up front. We've got all the things, right? Right. You do that. And we've done that for generations, right? And guess what? You haven't really questioned it. But I'm going to start to peel back the onion a little bit on this. You haven't questioned it because it was the perfect codependent situation. So think of codependence, it's a crutch. Those in leadership are codependent on those, say, and I'm going to use a manual labor system, setup for the team in this example, but you depend on your broader team, the labor of your broader team, to do the heavy lifting, maybe even literally, right, within your organization. And the broader team is codependent, say on the leadership and support staff, to do the admin and all those things, right, sales and so on and so forth, right? To do those things, they're codependent on that, right? We can look at this through that glass is half full. We can say dependent if you want, that's fine. But I prefer codependent, and there is a reason why. It's because we've so fooled ourselves. We've worn the filter for so long in front of our eyes that we never thought to question paradigms. And the paradigm is such that we become over compartmentalized. What have we done? We've defanged our ability to take off our training wheels to grow and expand in our ability to balance more than just what we can with the training wheels, right? In essence, there is no reason on planet Earth that you can't have people who have developed well enough along and earned the opportunity, right, to then take on some of the roles of the front office. And there's absolutely no reason that some of the front office folks can't go out and pitch in and help out some of the production folks, right? Absolutely no reason. Now, you may not be, because of certifications and that sort of thing, you may not be able to do everything. And that's not what we're saying. But what we are saying is the organization is essentially codependent, and by compartmentalizing created codependent departments. And because of that, we can get into this, they screwed up, no, they screwed up, right? It gets you can end up, sadly, when things aren't working well, in these finger pointing contests where folks are not taking responsibility. Well, if engineering hadn't screwed this up, well, if HR had this and that, and if, leadership that, and if training that, and so on and so forth, right? Everybody is everyone else's excuse. That's another red flag to tell you that you're codependent. Your organization is codependent, right? Another way to look at it too is that you have a linear approach to your organization's operation. You haven't run enough what if scenarios, and so therefore your fallback plan is your only plan. And because this has been the paradigm for organizations through multiple generations, people don't develop. They don't develop well enough to take off the training wheels, to understand that they can do more, they can be more, they can contribute more. And you might be thinking, well, but if I do that, I'm not going to get paid more. Well, that's another arena. We're actually wasting money. I'm laughing, but it's so sad I'm laughing. You're wasting money to compartmentalize. Because if you made people less codependent on other departments and other people, right? Because this can also be at the individual level where I'm not, I can't do this job, or I'm not familiar with this, and so I have to rely on so and so. So then it requires 2 or 3 people to get one thing done when somebody's away on vacation, those sorts of things. Sound familiar? But by keeping your organization codependent internally and as a whole, what happens is that you're paying more for less. And it would be wiser if you paid people more to do more, right? So I'm not saying don't pay your people for doing more. Do pay them. In fact, keep this in mind. You're going to have less turnover doing so because you're going to expand their knowledge. You're going to enable them to become, to grow and to take on more and have more ownership and more input. Communication line barriers are going to be shorter because now we've narrowed the amount of people that things have to go through, and so on and so forth. There's such a positive spillover when you stop allowing your organization to be codependent internally, right? Because you can think of it from this perspective. The work, we'll say the heavy lifting of the work, right? In this particular example, obviously there's so many examples we could use, but the heavy lifting of an organization, and then we have maybe the intellectual side of the house where we're doing plans and orders and admin and scheduling and all those things, right? And so you have the intellect and the labor. Well, because you've done that, you've essentially added more costs. Now, if you went through and enabled those people who are capable and able to take on or want to as well, because also remember, the lack of desire to want to take more on is also, I would say, a yellow flag. First of all, it signals that people aren't confident, right? They're not confident, perhaps not capable, and that's we have to be delicate there. Not everybody is all physically capable of doing every single thing. We get that. We understand these things. We're not saying do things that are silly and so far outside the zone that people are unsafe, right? Or put people at undue risk. That would be ridiculous to even contemplate. In fact, if you were relying on that as your excuse, you get an F for this video, because we're not saying that. What we're saying is that you want to reduce the necessity to have this codependence, because what you're doing is that you're inflaming the ability to be more codependent in other areas. Suddenly, a linear workforce becomes more linear. And now you've got to hire 25% or 20% more people to do the work of the original 80% that could have done the work, right? If we're assuming that's 100% at that time, right? So you have 20% more staff. Why? because you're so linear and you're so codependent. If you release some of that, now you would find a return. This is why I say you probably get 10% return over a stretch of time by growing your people, right? Developing your personnel, not just your labor force in this example, but your the broader team, but also your leadership and support staff, right? So this is critical. And if you feel like, well, we're never going to do that, that's never going to happen. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, this is exactly why your organization struggles, because they're being stifled, right? They're being stifled by the codependence. And it's also now becomes an enabling, because I'm enabling folks who could do more, right? I'm enabling them to believe that they can't, right? That they can't, that they have limitations. That now you're enabling your organization to take on this notion overall that, well, we have limitations because of these things. Well, you've already set yourself into a limited mindset. You've got a lack mindset right out of the gate when you think of things like that. I'm telling you, folks, you get 8-10%, and for those who are highly motivated, you could probably get about 19% by making some little bit of an adjustment, right? And it's not a bad thing to have this as an open conversation because we don't want to become a crutch. Now, there's a fine line. What's the fine line between a crutch and developing folks? Well, use this walking stick, for example, right? I can walk, but what's the walking stick? The walking stick is my backup, right? If I become imbalanced or if there's something I come across, or God forbid I twist my ankle, right? It is my what if scenario. It's my plan B. It might be my redundancy in my process. People who are supplemental to carrying out the functions of others while they're on vacation, those sorts of things. Your processes as well. And it's no different if we're talking about a line of production or any kind of service similarly. It's okay to have what if scenarios. Well, what if so-and-so's out sick? Or what if so-and-so, they're on maternity leave, right? What do we do then, right? If you're waiting for them to to be gone, to even address such things, you are so far behind the curve. I can't imagine how much money you've lost already because you haven't addressed such things. Well, what if there's a power outage for 2 weeks? If you haven't had these what if scenario conversations, then you are definitely a codependent organization, okay? Highly codependent, and you are serving up limitation across departments and within the organization as a whole, and that is your say drug of choice. Your drug is to believe. You're drugging and hypnotizing yourselves into believing that you can't do certain things, and you can. You can certainly do more. So we want to veer away from being in creating a codependent organization, and we don't want to be limited. And most people working in an organization want to develop and grow. They don't want to be bored either, right? There is that side of it. You're not going to get much of a dopamine hit in a positive sense unless you give people opportunities to grow. And doing that, you reward them, your productivity and quality go up, your customers are happier, you lose less customers, you gain more customers, and next thing you know, your organization is growing. Look, folks, there's just a few things, and of course I address many of these things and more in my book, The Journey to Transform Culture. You can find it on Amazon. Get the book, go through it. I mean, if you should be able to crank out 15 to 20% improvement just reading my book. You should be able to. If you can't, then you're not trying. You're just not, or you just don't read. You just get a book and throw it on the table. And there's plenty of folks, right? If you had a cure to some disease, if I had it on 2 pages and I said, this will cure XYZ that I know they have here, How many of us know people who would just be like, oh, thanks, and throw it on the table? Because why? Because for some reason, we can hand people the antidote, right? We can hand people the equation, the solution to the problem they've been trying to solve for years, and they will dismiss it based on what? Well, it's that codependent lack mindset, right? It's a codependent lack mindset, right? We're enabling each other down to our lowest common denominator, and that is that, well, we're limited by this, and we can't do it because of that, and I can't, and I can't, right? What did I hear in the South when I was back that way? Can't, never could. I love that. That's cute. All right, folks. Veer away from becoming a codependent organization. Don't be a member on a team within an organization that enables others to, by being a crutch, right? Making people believe that they need certain people or certain situations as a crutch, right? The organization as a crutch, keeping people compartmentalized as a crutch, right? Because these crutches are killing you, all right? These crutches are destroying your organization. These crutches, by making people or the system itself a crutch and mechanisms within it a crutch, what you're doing is you're defanging your organization's ability to grow, be productive, solve problems, be innovative, creative, and help customers. All right, folks. Hope you're having a great day. Remember, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage one another. And when you do that, what you're going to find is people are improving in all areas. They're not looking for a crutch, and they aren't allowing themselves to become a crutch. And they're veering away from codependent situations. And when we allow that to happen in others' lives, we're also allowing us to be free of the same crutches, right? Which is very important. We need to be competent, confident individuals. All right, folks. Hope you're having a great day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.